Welcome to another episode of Why We Podcast, where attorneys, consultants, coaches, and accountants share how their show helps the three populations, how it helps their guests, how it helps their audience, of course, and even how their podcast helps themselves. We broadcast live just about every Friday, 1 p.m. Eastern on YouTube, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and then you're able to catch this episode and prior episodes on your favorite podcast platform, be it Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts, Stitcher, which I personally use, or Spotify, iHeartRadio, a couple of others. Relatively easy. So looking forward for you to not only engage with the guests today, but also watch or listen to prior episodes and definitely share your comments with us. If you are a show host, I look forward to getting to know you, and perhaps you could be a future guest on Why You Podcast. And if you've been thinking about if you've been thinking about hosting your own show, your own podcast, you are definitely going to learn from a couple of folks right here today, let alone the other episodes of what it takes, how they got started, how it's grown, and how it's helped them, and of course, their clients, their audience, their guests, and of course, themselves. Maria, can you tell us a little bit more before we go into your show itself? Tell us a little bit about your business and how that got started.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the introduction. Hi, everyone. My name is Maria De Luna. I'm an aligned Purpose Lightworker spiritual coach. How I got started really was just a little bit before COVID occurred. I was working full time and working for my family's business. And suddenly I got a calling to step into my magic and step into my power and show up as a person that helps those around me really understand who they are and take away the blocks of the things that cause them to really not see their truest potential. And so that would have been, I want to say, almost 3 years ago now, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's been such a long time, or I can't believe how quickly things do fly, you know? And so I'm actually stationed in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. And yes, the cold country of all. But I help women and men who are looking to really understand themselves without all the blocks and causes that happen inside of us. And that's really who I am. And I do a lot of online services with that.
What was the trigger? What was the aha moment for you to step into your magic, as you say? Like, what happened?
So actually, really interestingly enough, I've always been very intuitive, very spiritual, and very connected to my magic. But, I say with the everyday life, we all have responsibilities and bills to pay. So, I decided to connect with my family to do so. And I was very fortunate in everything I did. And one day in January of 2020, I was walking my German Shepherd outside. And all I could feel was this heaviness in the air. And it was the entire collective energy of everyone having fear, having uncertainties. And I started really tearing up. I was walking my dog in tears. And suddenly I have the ability to see, but I saw my 3 ancestors coming in and saying, I know you've been busy, but it's time. And so that was my biggest calling. Since at the age of 3, I've actually been able to see spirit. And I never really stepped into the whole showing people and stuff like that because it was taboo for quite some time, right? So anytime you saw spirits, you were considered either one thing or the other. And so therefore, I always kept it more of a secret. And until that moment, I started opening up to the community here. And now it's become just the everyday thing for me. Like I can't speak more about it than I can now. So
sure, and it sounds like you host a show about it, which we'll get to. But first, Sylvie, can you give us a little background about what you do professionally and where are you joining us from?
Hi, Rajan. Thanks for having me. I'm currently in Cairo, so it's 7 p.m. But I live in London. So the Young and Independent Project is something that I started last year, I think around July. everything is related to COVID nowadays. The same is true for me. But professionally, I'm a finance person, so I've done finance all my life. But I started the Young and Independent Project after I took a coaching course with Coach Laura Miles in London. After the course, I was like, wow, what just happened to me? I had this aha moment, like, I've always been a driven person. I've always been focused and stuff like that, because I lost my father when I was 16, and my siblings were pretty young, and it was a car crash. So when someone is sick, you guys are prepared psychologically and emotionally, but he just left for work and never came back, and I always had that weight on me. Fast forward, 2020 happened. I had to stay home with my kids as well. I got off work, I lost my job, I had to stay home with my kids. And I just felt all this pressure, stress. I felt depressed for the first time. And while watching, all these YouTube videos that, will help me become emotionally resilient, this ad popped up, and it was Coach Laura. She was, saying, hey, if you're a woman out there and, you need this. I just clicked. I never do. I always skip. I never listen till the end. But that particular clip, I listened and I clicked and I bought her course. I went on that course for 5 days, and it just changed my life forever. And after that, I was like, okay, Sylvie, you've learned all these things, coupled with your experience and everything that you know about life in Africa, now in London. What can you give back to society? How can you reach out and say, hey, I know all these things, I can teach you guys. That's how the Young and Independent Project started, because I've always struggled with money after my father died. And I know how it is back home in Africa when you're struggling with money, especially a woman, a young girl. You're like, pray to every man. Literally, they want to use you to give you, I don't know, $1, $2. You would not imagine how terrible it is. And so for me, the first people I wanted to reach out to were young girls, because that's really my category, and obviously to teach young men as well how to become financially independent, because I've done a lot of things, to be able to afford for myself and to build the reputation that I've been able to build all these years.
So how do you work with your clients now? Where is it one-on-one, and what is the process like around the financial independence?
Actually, everything I do currently is free, because I started last year, July, like I said. So I have a WhatsApp group. I've got a Facebook group as well, where I just post job opportunities and any kind of opportunity that pops up for those who are on the group. I also blog. So I write a lot of content about financial independence, how I created my first company at 21, how I, started my small business and grow it. Those are the kind of things that I write about, real life stuff that people can relate to, that people can feel. Blog about the stock market, how people can get started, those kind of things. And I've got a WhatsApp group where there are many young people, especially from 5 all the way up to uni level, who are still looking at this thing called life and thinking, oh, it's easy. I'm just preparing them that, hey, life's not easy. Once you step into it, this is how you should navigate to avoid all the pitfalls that I eventually fell into. So that's what I do.
So we're gonna get into how Maria started her show, but Sylvie, while we're talking, how did your show come about? When did it start, and what's the name of the show, and why did you call it that? Can you give us a little bit of background about your show?
Yeah, well, it started July last year, and the reason why I called it Young and Independent is because I believe that financial independence is the only independence that will really afford you freedom. When you have money to be able to lay back and say, hey, today I just want to praise God, I just want to worship God, or today I just want to watch TV, today I don't want to do anything, today I just want to be charitable, and the reason why I went down that route is because a lot of evil things that happen in our world, and in Africa in particular, is linked to money. So if people are able to understand that charity begins at home, that they can have their own money and not necessarily depend on someone else to tell them what to do, to use them for their own selfish desires, then they can indeed tap into their full potential, live their best lives, and make our world a better place, because if we're all busy doing our own thing that we love, there's less time to hate, to be jealous, envious, and all these evil things that we experience in the world.
All right, well, we're going to get to know Young and Independent a little bit more. Maria, how did your show come about? What is it called, and why did you name it that?
I named it the Unapologetic Human. And the reason I named it that was because of my own personal movement into the spiritual world, and how, we're always told to be a certain way, do certain things, become something else, and it then becomes something that we're not. And the reason I started it was to really help both men, women, children, whoever listens to it, really understand that being unapologetic doesn't mean you have to be rude or mean or, a little bit different, but it's more about coming within, knowing your truth, knowing who you are, becoming part of yourself, really understanding the magic of you is what makes you different, because we all try to be everyone else all the time. And so, when I created this podcast, which was fairly recent, actually, to be honest, I hadn't thought about doing it. I was actually going to wait till next year, but Spirit called and said, you need to create it now. And so I created the podcast so that people can really understand that everyone can tell you what to be, who to be, what to become. But to really embody unapologeticness is to come into self and to understand self.
So bring us into a little bit more. So when did you start the show? And sure, you felt that calling, but there's still the logistics involved, and you actually went through the logistics of actually having the show. So talk to us about that process of when did you first have that feeling that the time is now, to the point of the first episode, and walk us through that.
So actually it was very interesting. I was on a vacation with my partner in Mexico for 5 weeks, and that would have been January. And I was always looking into it, and I was saying, okay, here's the things that I need to do step by step to create a really good show that actually works for me. And, I called a bunch of different locations, different places, just to make sure. But everything inside just kept saying, like, it's time. Like, you can't hold this back anymore. And so the first thing I did was, get the show created, get all the things that I needed to do with logistic stuff, making sure that, the banner was correct and everything. As you guys know, right? It's all about the little details sometimes too, hey?
Sometimes.
But it was, reaching out to a location in Facebook and just looking for people as well too, to come onto the show and talk about their own experience, because we are all storytellers, right? So I love to have people come on and talk about their story of how they live unapologetically each and every moment whenever they can, because those are the inspirations that some people who are still trying to find that inside of themselves, that they don't know others may be experiencing that. And so it's the story that really got me. It's the connection, the community of it. That's really why I created it, right? So.
And so you got the inspiration in January. When did the first episode premiere?
So the first episode actually just premiered 2 weeks ago.
All right. Wow. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So did you, were you banking episodes, or was that the very first episode?
That was I was banking other episodes before,
Okay.
so I have pre-records myself.
Okay.
Yes.
So now you started releasing it 2 weeks ago.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
How many episodes do you have banked? Why did you wait? What was that magic number?
I have actually 24 episodes banked.
Okay. So 24 episodes, you felt, all right, you now it's time.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And so tell us about the format. So who do you have on as a guest, and how do you choose them? Why them? What's that process like? What's the format and guests of the show?
I look for those who have, either gone through different circumstances, coaches, business owners, anyone of CEO as well too, anyone who's come into life where they do live their life exactly where they want it to be unapologetically. Like, to me, there isn't really a category for them, right? It's more about what have they gone through in their experience that really, benefits them, and they continue to fully put that into their soul, their body, their mind, their connection of who they are. And they say, I am me. This is who I am. I'm not going to say anything else. So that's the category that I work with.
Cool. What about you, Sylvie? When did you start the show, and what was the logistics like to actually get to the first episode? And tell us about the format of how you structure the show.
Well, I wasn't tech savvy, to be honest. When I first had this inspiration, I was like, and then this guy, Pat Flynn, when I Googled how to start a podcast, I didn't even know, I didn't know anything about podcasts, before last year, July. So I Googled, how to start a podcast, and this guy, Pat Flynn, popped up, and he had a free course, and he was teaching people how to start a podcast. So I went for Speaker. I didn't really know how to use it. So if you listen to my old podcast, you would somewhat laugh. I was trembling. It was my first time to really talk to people, or express myself, tell my story. And it was, for some strange reason, when I sent out the first episode, my sister was like, that was really good. I was like, really? She was like, yeah, I've sent it to my friends. They all like it. I was like, okay, maybe I'm good at this thing after all. But I was, filled with a lot of fear, and I wasn't sure if it was something I wanted to do. But just like Maria, I felt it was the right time, that, it was the right time to reach out to people and to, I always say that no one is too old to learn and no one is too young to teach. So I felt that I knew something that others didn't know, no matter how small, and it was my civil responsibility to, spread this message.
Good for you. And so when did it premiere?
July last year, I think.
July last year. Okay, so relatively quickly. So after you learned kind of some of the logistics.
I never banked anything. I just took the phone and I started recording.
All right, good for you.
I was like, if I banked it, I would not have published it.
Fair enough, right. But sometimes it's good to go back and have your own blooper reel and kind of relive how it was. We all have to start somewhere. Our first performance is never the best one, hopefully.
Right.
So it's a good thing. So do you structure your show in a specific way? Do you have segments? What kind of guests do you have? How do you choose the guests?
Well, none of that. I don't, I'm not into the nitty-gritty of structuring, editing and all that. I'm just as natural as possible. I've only had a few guests, and the first guest I brought on was a friend who created a restaurant at the same time as me, and she traveled to the US, when I traveled to England. So I wanted her to talk about her experience of, starting her own restaurant back home, and why we think that people back home need to take small businesses more seriously. That was the first guest I got on. And it was a pretty nice show. We laughed on it. It was unedited. And we just published it. And the second guest was a friend from school. When I look back, right, Rajan, everyone, or not everyone, but a good majority of the young girls, I'm dark skinned, bleaching their skin, they're trying to look, white. And I feel really bad because research really points at cancer when you're doing all these things. And more people back home are getting all types of cancer. They have strange illnesses. And when I came across this schoolmate of mine who was ever dark, like she's always been, I was like, wow, I need to get on the show so that she can explain to me why, despite the pressure, the peer pressure, and everyone, making skin bleaching a trend, why she hasn't done it. I wanted her to give her own perspective of being dark skin in a Black country. Like, you look around you, everyone is becoming fair. All of a sudden, you're like, am I living in a white country here? So I had to bring her on, and it was a fantastic conversation. I've only had 4 guests so far. And the reason why I pick my guest is to be able to address a particular myth or an ongoing situation or trend in Africa that needs to be addressed.
That's great. I mean, both of you are relatively new podcast hosts, which makes it a kind of that itself an interesting discussion. What have you seen, Maria, already? Has it made an impact on you? Has it made an impact on your business? Like, what have you seen so far, and what's that ultimate goal that you would want with your show?
I have seen an impact in the people that actually come to me, as I've advertised only just in certain areas with it for now, just to see how it goes first. But
what do you mean by that? What do you mean?
So I only placed it in iTunes, and
okay.
I didn't put it too many places like Spotify and all. I didn't even know about that place until last year.
All right.
But it has made an impact because, when people reach out to you and say, like, I really love hearing about this person's personal experience, it really does help you understand that there is a reason why we did it in the first place, right? So, one of the things that I found, obviously starting, is do your research, know where you're going with it. There's a lot out there. Podcasting isn't simple, right? So, that's basically where I went with that. And my goal, and honestly, the outcome is just to continue on to season 2, season 3, season 4, just as much as I can, and really just continue to make a difference and to those who are listening.
And what about you, Sylvie? Like, what's that overall impact and goal that you're looking to achieve with your show?
Oh, well, so far I've received really, really good feedback from young people. I get text messages every now and then from students like, hi, ma'am, a friend of mine told me about you and she gave me your number. I'm struggling with my studies. I'm struggling with this bad group of friends. I'd like to start a holiday job. What do you recommend? My boyfriend broke my heart and I'm struggling to study, all these, things. But one thing that really marked me and I felt, oh my God, I need to continue. I don't have to stop, is when a young man came across my podcast. He started listening. I think he binge listened, and he reached out and said, your podcast literally just saved me. I was like, okay.
So you broke up a little bit there with this story, and I want to understand it. Can you share exactly how did he listen to the show and what happened?
Yeah. So he had been struggling financially, and he got in touch with his relatives. And one of his relatives knew that I have a podcast that talks about financial independence and blogs about financial independence. So he recommended my podcast to this young man. The young man binge listened to my podcast, and then he messaged me and said, your podcast literally saved my life. Please, I need you to coach me. I'm like, well, I'm not a coach, but I can share what I know with you and just, sort of provide some information that can comfort you and give you hope again. So I took him on the 8-day course, some course I came up with. And after the course, he was like, I wish my friend was alive to take this course. He would not have died. These courses has literally changed my life. I was giving up. Now I've repaired my bike. I've got hope again. I'm now going about looking for farms where I could start farming to, sell the produce and be able to raise money and to be able to start this particular business. Thank you so much, stuff like that. They just, when he said that to me, I was like, wow. And in the course of talking with me, he had been absent for 2 days from the course. So I asked him, where have you been? He said, oh, there was a young girl, because there's an ongoing crisis, right, in Cameroon, where I'm originally from, in the Anglophone part of Cameroon, and so many people have died already, and so many people have been displaced. And he lives in this region. And so I was asking him, everything okay? He said, well, the military invaded his village and his brother got shot. And at the same time, there was a young girl who had lost her parents, who was 13 and was in his care. She got raped, pregnant, and she had given birth and she died during childbirth. She had 2 babies. Yeah, they had twins and she died. And I was like, gosh, And I just said to him, and he was very sad. And I said to him that be strong. You have to. He said, but I want to finish the course because I feel really optimistic about finishing it, and I know that it's going to help me. And he finished the course. And I said to him, hey, I want to be able to provide for these twin babies as little as I can. I'm not rich, but, perhaps I can commit to this amount of money every month to buy the meal. Because I know you're not working. This little girl died and left her babies. She was raped. She didn't go out asking for it. Stuff like that. And then I started to think, okay, maybe I need to start a charity organization in the back of this just to support people who are vulnerable, who need a hand. But I don't have the money, and I'm trusting that God is going to provide. But, it's all these things when you start to do stuff like that, and people start to reach out to you and express their issues to you, then you just have this drive to carry on so that you can teach them how to catch their own fish rather than give them fish.
I think both of you have shown that in a relatively short amount of time, even as kind of a newbie podcast host, you can make this amount of difference and impact on others, and that you don't need a very large following or a large audience or a big number of downloads or subscribers and kind of all those metrics that sometimes people get hung up on, but rather you're having a one-to-one conversation either with your guest or at least figuratively a one-to-one conversation with someone who's listening or watching your show, and the impact can be made on someone's life. In both of yours way, a very profound way. With my show, it's to inspire other podcast hosts, but they in turn are going to be impacting others. We're going to take a quick 1-minute commercial, as I am my own advertiser on my show. When we come back, I'd love for everyone to kind of hear how they can get a hold of you, your Facebook groups, your social media channels, and of course, where they can listen to your podcast as well. And then I'd love for you to talk about another podcast that you're a fan of and why you are a raving fan of that podcast host and of that show. But let's come back in about a minute. Do you want your own podcast like this one? My team will do all the grunt work for you. Just show up, smile, and enjoy talking to your potential clients and referral relationships. Go to videosocials.net/govip to watch our 9-minute webinar for all the details. Are you a busy lawyer, coach, consultant like me? You should have a podcast done for you to get you more clients, impress your colleagues, and it becomes your perpetual referrals flywheel. We find you the right guests. We schedule your guests, handle all the podcast tech, get you into Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and more. Done for you. Go to videosocials.net/govip to watch our 9-minute webinar for all the details. Now back to the show. And we are back. Maria's back. Caught her. Right back with Maria and Sylvie, two great podcast hosts, relatively new, but already making an impact. Were either of you at our show host networking event yesterday?
No, I wasn't able to make it.
So once a month, and so the next one is April 28th, I want to say, and then May 26th. So it's the last Thursday of the month. We had about, 77 or so folks yesterday. So we bring together dozens and dozens of podcast hosts, especially those who interview other guests. And so it's a way for podcast hosts to become interviewed and featured on other people's podcasts as well. So if that's interesting to you, Maria, Sylvie, you should definitely join us April 28th or May 26th. Just about every last Thursday of the month is what we're planning for it. So we'll get you the links, of course, but for the viewers and listeners, videosocials.net/showhosts, all plural. So videosocials with an S at the end, .net/showhosts, plural. And it's free. It's a great way for you as a podcast host to get to know others and learn as resources, but also get interviewed and featured on other shows. And of course, if you're thinking about hosting a show, it's a great way to network with those who are, who are doing it in the trenches, getting the visibility, creating the impact, and of course, generating the profits for their business. Maria, where can people catch your show? Is it audio only? And where do they listen to it? I think only Apple Podcasts you mentioned?
Yeah, that's right. Only Apple Podcasts at the moment. So it's just on Apple. I am actually looking to integrating it to YouTube as well too. So you can watch out for that. Just look under for my name, Maria De Luna. Very, very easy. I don't try to make it too difficult, but also look for the Unapologetic Human, which also is the title of the podcast. That's basically where you can find them.
Cool. Yeah, that's awesome. And new episodes get released how often?
Every 2 weeks, actually.
Okay, every 2 weeks, and for the next couple of weeks, so you already have it banked. That's awesome. Sylvie, what about you? Where can we catch your show?
Well, because I use Spreaker distributes it for me on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, and Castbox, Easy, all these other podcasts.
So the top 5
Spreaker
and a couple of others.
Yeah, Spreaker's got it.
Is it audio only right now, or is it also video?
Actually, my Spreaker is linked to YouTube, but it's not video. It's just audio.
Okay, it's an audio on YouTube.
Yeah.
That's great. Sylvie, is there a podcast that you're a fan of and a host that you're a raving fan of that you want to give a spotlight to?
Yeah, so like I said, no one is too old to learn, right? Or too young to teach. So on Facebook, I reached out to Alan. So someone made a post on a podcast group on Facebook and said, what are you struggling with, to grow your podcast? So I just said, well, I really, you may have a fantastic message, but if people don't know where to hear it, what value does it add? So I'd like for more people back home to be able to listen to what I have to say and to be able to pick one or two things that they can use to change their lives. So I made a comment, I said, well, I'm trying to get more people to listen to me and this message that I have. So this guy, Alec, Casson, reached out to me inbox and said, hey, Sylvie, I saw your comment. Maybe I can help you. Let's, get on a Zoom call. So I said, okay. So we got on a Zoom call. He was really nice. And then he just gave me 1 or 2 tips on how to, grow my podcast without necessarily buying fancy equipment and all these things. So he also promised that he was going to send me a free guide, which he did. And I thought, wow, he's very kind. So he's out there trying to help other people to grow their podcast.
Does he have a podcast?
He does.
Okay. So what's the name of the show?
I don't know the name of the show.
Okay, well, we got to get there. Yeah. Is there another, are you a fan of another show? Since the whole point of this is talking about somebody else's podcast. Are you a fan of somebody else's podcast, Sylvie?
Me? Yeah, so many podcasts. I like Louis House, Anthony O'Neill. I listen to his podcast as well. I think that's about it. Anthony O'Neill and Louis House. I like their podcast very much. I think that they've got a lot of value. When I go on there for Anthony, I'm not there for the date. I'm there for the business best that he gets. I saw a young lady in his last podcast who was 27 and she had just built $1 million business from her phone, on Instagram. Those are the kind of things that inspire me and I go to. And anyways, he has all these fantastic guests like Les Brown, that very much, Yeah, and there was Rachel Rogers that I admired very much as well, who was on his podcast. So yeah, those two podcasts.
A lot of people, but I want to leave time for Maria as well as we wrap up. Maria, is there a show that you're a fan of, a podcast host that you're a fan of?
Yeah, actually, it's called Becoming You, the podcast of Becoming You. It's hosted by a woman named Rebecca Cafuro. She's actually one of my best inspirations that I listen to every single time. Sometimes I wish I could put on more podcasts because I really think, she takes and tackles all things from mind, body, business, and personal life. So for those of you who are listening, check her out. She is just on fire.
And do you listen to her on Apple Podcasts, or where do you catch her?
I go on iTunes, which is usually one of my favorite platforms, as you know. And she's just on Apple, and she's just one of the many that I love. But she's my first go-to for sure.
That's cool. As we wrap up, Maria, is there any kind of go-to place that you want to send people for a freebie or any other kind of thing that you're working on?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I have a Facebook group called Quantum Magic School for those of you who are really wanting to get some freebies and stuff in regards to how to really align within your own abundance and connecting with your magic. I send out freebies in that area. Come check it out. It's really super simple and also a great community for people to meet others as well.
Cool. Sylvie, what about you? Anything?
Well, I've got a Facebook group, Young and Independent People, like I said earlier in the show, where I post job opportunities and all other opportunities that can help young people grow. And then I've got a website as well, www.youngandindependent.com. That's where I blog. And that's where you can see all the material that I blog. I'm actually working on a free ebook right now. I just completed it today, which is going to be available soon.
All right. So hopefully by the time people listen to this, they'll be able to go to the site and get their free copy. Wow. This has been terrific. Sylvie, thank you so much for tuning in from all the way in Cairo. And despite the audio challenges, I think we really did learn a good number of things from you. Despite you being new, you're already making such a positive impact. So congratulations. Likewise, Maria, thank you for taking the time all the way in Canada to bring your insights to us. It's great. This has been another episode of Why We Podcast. We stream live just about every Friday, 1 o'clock Eastern, on all the major social media platforms from YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn. And you can catch prior episodes on Apple Podcasts, of course, but also Stitcher, Google Podcast, Spotify, and others. Again, my name is Vik Rajan. I have been your host. I'm also the co-founder of Video Socials, which is a video blogging community for lawyers and accountants, coaches and consultants. We come together on our video blogging clubs to record our video blogs and podcast promo videos together, fun and done. I look forward to seeing you April 28th or May 26th at our next show host networking event. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.